Hey everyone, we're the Violet Reality. My name is Casey Rain. I'm here with Kim Camellia. We are sitting in the basement of the Herrick Gallery in London, where for the next few days we have an amazing event, Prince, a London private view photography exhibition by the one and only Afshin Shahidi. So you know that we had to get Afshin here for an episode of your favorite show, Uncovering Prince.
Let's take it all the way back to the very beginning first. When did you first meet Prince?
Great question. I met Prince before he met me. I met him when I was in junior high, and I discovered 1999, the album. So not in person, but I heard his music, and I think that to me was a huge introduction, and it made me just stop and try to figure out who this person was and go back. And that's before I even realized he's from Minneapolis. And then I realized he's from Minneapolis. I'm like, oh my God, there's this dynamo that lives here. So then I discovered Dirty Mind and Controversy, two of my most favorite albums. So that's when I first met Prince. Prince met me when I filmed a little bit and made my way into Paisley Park on the set of one of his music videos by telling the producer that I knew how to load film into a film camera, which I didn't, but I knew that was the only way that I could potentially get into Paisley Park. So that was in 1993. It was on a music video shoot. I got a text that I answered, hoping that it was for work, and it was. And they said, "Can you load film?" I said, "I can," thinking I had a few days to go learn how to do what they were asking me. And they said, "Great, we need you out here." And I tried to get out of it. I'm like, "Oh no, well, I'm not available today." And in the midst of me trying to backtrack and get out of it, she said, "Chanhassen." And it just clicked. I'm like, Chanhassen, the only person in Chanhassen that could potentially be making a music video has got to be Prince. And I said, "I'll be right there." So I showed up, and they took me over to the main camera assistant who I would be working for. There were guys from LA that had flown in. And the guy's like, "Okay, so you know how to load this magazine?" It was, back in the film days. And I said, "Yeah, I know how I like to do it. But how would you like me to do it?" And he knew right away I had no idea, because really it's not a creative thing, loading a mag. There's one right way to do it, and if you don't do it that way, you mess it all up. And but he had no choice but to teach me at that moment. So to make a long story short, I walked into Paisley Park, into the main sound stage, and Prince was literally right there finishing a shot that they were doing. And he looked over at me and saw this kid that didn't look like the rest of the crew. I had big curls and long hair, and I was, a brown kid in a predominantly white setting. And he came up to me. He's like, "Who are you?" And I really had to do a double take and look around and be like, "Is he talking to me?" And sure enough, he was. So that was when I first met him.
Walking into Paisley Park, what were your first impressions of Paisley Park as a whole?
I had driven by it, having grown up in Minnesota. I had driven by it, so I kind of knew. You guys have been there recently. Back in 1993, Paisley Park was kind of like the shining beacon on a hill. There was nothing around it. So there's been a lot that's been built up, strip malls and stores and other businesses. But back then, it was just woods and then Paisley Park. So to me, being able to finally step in was really huge. But I was also nervous, because you got to remember, I had told them that I could do this thing that I couldn't do. So I was really nervous walking in there, both about, okay, how am I going to get by that, but also the potential of seeing or meeting Prince, because I had never seen him in person, at the time. So I walked in, I was just in awe, but really right off the bat, he came up to me, and which made it really nice, but made it even more nerve-wracking, because now he knew the guy that was going to mess up his film. Luckily, I didn't. And it all worked out, and so, the rest is history from there.
Do you remember which music video that first one was?
I don't remember, because I was so nervous, and I was in the back room loading. It was something from Gold, I believe, but after that, one video that I just sticks in my head, and I don't know if this was it, was Endorphin Machine, because they play that so loud. And when you do a music video, it's a track that plays and they're lip syncing to it, but they played it so loud and over and over and over again. Luckily, I like the song, but like it's been burned into my mind. I love hearing it because it takes me back to that time. So no, I do love it, but I'm not sure if that was the first day or not. Because the other thing too that happened, that the first time I went in there, they had hired me, and I didn't know why they hired me so last minute. But a lot of things that happened in and around Paisley were not very well pre-planned. It was all very spontaneous. So both me coming in was kind of last minute, but another thing that I saw that just kind of opened my eyes to both the industry and to the level that you had to be to work with Prince was that day he fired the cinematographer who they had flown in from LA to shoot those things and send him home. So I'm like, wow, okay, this is how quickly it starts and how quickly it can end.
One thing that comes up quite a lot with a lot of different people that worked at Paisley Park in different creative ways is this whole thing about coming in one capacity and then doing something else, and Prince encouraging people to do things that they didn't know that they could do and giving them the opportunity to do things. So how did that play out for you in your journey coming in, saying that you could just load film and work in that capacity to being his photographer?
That is very true. And most of the people that have worked with Prince can attest to the fact that they probably started doing one thing. You may have been his chef, but then you were booking his show, or you may have been the driver, but you became his security and then his manager. So we all have similar stories. Part of that, and I'll answer your question, but I think part of that is Prince didn't want to have lot of people around him. He didn't want one person that just did this and one. So if he was able to see something in somebody and say, oh, they can, not only can they do this, but they can do this, he could reduce the number of people he had to deal with. So I think part of it came just from a practical reason for Prince. Like, why do I need 20 people when 3 people can handle everything that I want? And I can trust these 3 people. So I think that came from there. For me, that first introduction working, and I had returned to Minneapolis to get into the film industry. I don't know why I chose Minneapolis. That wasn't like the heart of the film world, but I wanted to be back home. I really like Minnesota and Minneapolis, so I wanted to get into the film business. That was an early opportunity for me. Being a film loader is probably the lowest position in terms of the camera crew on productions, but it was a good introduction to it for me. From there, I became a camera assistant, or a focus puller is what they call it here in England. And basically, it is what it is. You change the focus on the camera as the subject moves back and forth to maintain focus. If you can imagine on a music video with Prince, with cameras that are flying around and a person that's moving around, and no rehearsals, it's quite a feat to get them in focus, and they're not always in focus. And so Prince, we would do playback and he would watch. And so he got to know me pretty well, because sometimes things were in focus and other times they weren't. And if they weren't, he'd come up and look at me. And then I would offer to give him the little handheld focus machine and say, I'll run around and you try to keep me in focus, which he didn't think was all that funny. But I think I was one of the few people that engaged him and spoke with him. And so he appreciated that. And again, like I said, I looked different than most of the people that he was used to coming through. But he also recognized that I had a passion for it. And so beyond the technical aspects of filmmaking, I aspired to be, have more creative input. And so I remember another early opportunity that Prince gave me that kind of took me out of the technician world and into a more creative world was I was on another music video. It was a LA crew that he had brought in that was shooting it. I was the local kid they had hired to hit the slate and do some of the technical stuff on the cameras. And there was a shot that they were trying to get, and Prince just wasn't happy with the angles and everything. And he looked at me because he kind of knew me and recognized me. He was like, can you do it? And I didn't want to step on any toes, so I looked over at the DP, the director of photography, just like, what do I do in this situation? I don't want to step out of line. And he was so flabbergasted because he couldn't do it, and he's like, yeah, go for it. So Prince said, what would you do? And I said, well, this angle, the reason you don't like it is because you've seen it so many times, and I know you don't want to repeat things. I would shoot from here, and he's like, okay, do it. And so then I found myself standing on top of his purple grand piano that's in that small room. I took my shoes off, obviously, and I filmed, and he's like, yeah, that's it. And so that, again, was a moment where he saw the potential. And then so I all of a sudden became a camera operator. And so I would get called out to operate the camera. And from there, it progressed. Okay, I did the lighting, and then he was calling me to shoot everything for him. He saw me as an image maker. He liked the way I did lighting. And one day when I had gone to Paisley Park in the winter to work on something with Prince, I had brought a small case that held my still camera equipment. And I was a hobbyist. I didn't really bill myself as a still photographer, but I had the gear and I didn't want to leave it in the car because it was just freezing outside and I didn't want it to get damaged. And Prince looked in, this huge space, Paisley Park, and he knew every inch of it. And so he saw something that was out of place. He's like, what's that? It was a silver, like Halliburton type case. And I said, oh, that's my still equipment. And he's like, huh, you're a still photographer? And I tried to I mumbled my way through, like, yeah, I'm trying, and he walked away. We shot what we were going to shoot video-wise. And then as I was leaving, his producer came up to me and said, Prince would like for you to come back and photograph his band. He's got a tour coming up and, he wants to see what you do. So that was my first kind of, I guess, audition as a still photographer. I went in. I shot his band in Paisley Park in the sound stage. It was John Blackwell, Renato Neto, and those images came back. It was film. I went in. I was really nervous. I had him kind of presented like how I thought a photographer would present his work. I had no idea. And he kind of flipped through it, laughed. He was there during the shoot, but he didn't hover and micromanage. He just let me kind of do my thing with those guys. And then so when he saw the images, he was, I felt like he liked them. So he said, great. And then walked away again. And as I was wrapping up and it had gone as well as I had hoped it could go, his producer came and said, Prince would like you to come back and photograph him. And I got really nervous. And I'm like, what? But I thought he already had picked, I thought he flew in guys from New York and LA and he's set and she said, no, he did, but he would like you to photograph him, come up with some ideas. I'm like, that's a tall order, come up with some ideas. But that was it. And so I was able to go back, photograph him. He liked those. And he then asked me to go on tour with him, which was like, a dream.
How would Prince react when you were showing him photos and he saw something that he really liked? And how would he react when he saw something that he just thought was terrible?
Well, we would, once I started shooting digitally and we had kind of the immediate feedback that you're able to have with digital, I would load the images onto a computer. I would go through and do my first edit, get rid of the out of focus shots that were, not intentionally out of focus and anything that would just, didn't fit or wasn't good. And then I would do one more edit thinking about what I think Prince would like, and I would get rid of more because I didn't want to present Prince with 1,000 images that I took. I had to narrow them down. And then we'd sit on the laptop, and he was pretty focused, and it usually would happen after the band had gone home. It was the last thing we did at night, so I ended up spending many hours with him, in the wee hours of the morning going through images. And it was usually... Sometimes it would be nerve-wracking for me when I would do an edit and I wasn't happy necessarily with what we had gotten. So it'd be really nerve-wracking to see what his reaction was. But he would, anything that he liked, he would point like, yeah, that one. And I'm there kind of either starring or deleting or, making some notes. And if he didn't like it, he would actually do the same thing. If he liked it a lot or if he didn't like it, he would turn his head and give me this look, like either what were you thinking or wow, that's cool. And I had to decipher myself what it was, and I could usually tell by the image, but sometimes I couldn't. So he would give me that look, and then I just remember those times because there were certain images that I really liked, right? And I would go through and I would get to one of them, hoping that he would be like, yeah, that one. And if he didn't, I would pass it, and then I would hit the button back like I did it by accident, just to let him have a second glance at it, hoping that he would change his mind. And sometimes he would, and be like, "Oh yeah, that one," and other times he'd look at me like, "Okay, what are you doing? You're going the wrong way." So it wasn't necessarily the same thing. It was a very interactive, sometimes it was, like I said, it was at the end of the night, and if he was tired, we went through quickly. If he still had energy, we would do it, and he would tell me about, I like this, and if you do something again like this, let's change it up. And so he had some notes for me, but never like very consistent. So either I would walk away from those things really elated and happy, and sometimes I'd be like, wow, okay, that didn't go as well as I had hoped. I got to figure it out for next time.
What was the kind of the split difference between times when you were just shooting him for no particular reason or no particular project, and then times where it was like, okay, this is going to be for an album, or it's going to be for this specific thing, or and how would that work differently compared to when there was no particular reason?
Early on, when I started photographing him, outside of the initial shoot that I did, as kind of the audition, which ended up in some tour books. Once I was on the road and I was photographing him during one night alone, a lot of the reason, and I wondered, I'm like, wow, I'm taking so many pictures of this one person. What could he possibly want? But he obviously cared for the fans, and he knew fans liked images, and we were doing different cities in Europe, and so it was for his music club. Really, a lot of the images that I was making were servicing the music club, just to have new content, to get fans excited about the shows. So it was rarely that I would know, okay, we're gonna do this shoot right now specifically for an album cover, or specifically for a tour book, or specifically for for my website. It was always just anything that was cool. We would find ways to use it. I think he did plan at one point. He was talking about taking musicology and making it a world tour, which would have been fantastic. And that was one of the things I was really looking forward to. I'm sad that didn't happen. But I did. I flew back to Minneapolis, to Paisley Park, and Sam was there. And we were doing that shoot intentionally for a world tour book. And Sam and I had gone through the web and, looked at the cities that were selected, and picked images, iconic images from that city. And then I was photographing Prince on a green screen, and we were putting him into those images. So there's even a picture in my book that looks like him in an old Russian, really ornate looking building. That's a composite image that I shot in Paisley Park, and then we put that background on it. So that was a specific case. And so for those things I knew, but a lot of the things were very spontaneous. I mean, me going to Morocco, I didn't even know at the time that I was flying to Morocco that he's making a music video. I think he got there, looked around, said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. Where's Afshin? Oh, why isn't he here? Okay, call him." And then I'm on the next flight out to Morocco, or the same thing with Panama. So it was always kind of very spontaneous, last minute, which was challenging and exciting. And luckily I had a family who understood and supported me in this. I ended up burning some bridges with other companies that I worked with, because I'd be like, Prince calls and I'm going to go to Morocco, sorry. It became difficult to do that, because professionally I didn't want to do it to Prince, and I felt bad doing it to these other people. So I had to find the balance of that. But it was mostly that. I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed being around him, and I think he enjoyed being around me. And then there was the added benefit that I was a photographer. And so I was able to pick up my camera when something was neat, and put it down at other times and hang out. It felt organic in that way.
What can you tell us about the atmosphere and the vibe at 3121 in Vegas? And were you there on the night that Michael Jackson showed up? And did you try and get a photo of them? Because Prince joked that a photo of them together would be worth $1 million.
The Vegas shows were amazing. It was the first time he did a residency, and I think he liked it, because the toll that being on the road takes on your body and psyche is non-existent. He could go sleep in his own bed, go to LA or Minneapolis in between. So I think he really enjoyed it, and it was a great place for all the fans to come together and see other fans from other places. It was almost like this this, well, not, I don't want to call it a mecca because maybe it doesn't go that deep, but it was a cool place for everyone to gather. And then he had so many aspects. I mean, from the keys at the Rio being changed to Prince's image, and it was one of the images that I had taken of him, which was cool, to having the restaurant be a Prince-themed restaurant. All of those touches, yeah, all of those touches were fantastic. And then, of course, the music is what it is, as always. But then occasionally he would have a party afterwards, or he'd have people to his suite. So there was something magical about the initial 3121 house that I think from that point we just tried to recapture and recreate for people. And it's not so much that we recreated it; it evolved and became its own thing. So I thought Vegas was cool. I was there the night that Michael was there, but I didn't know Michael was there. I was so focused on Prince. And like so many other rooms that Prince is in, it doesn't matter who else is there. He's the center of attention. So I've walked into spaces where it's been CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and A-list actors and people that typically anyone else would just, lose their mind seeing. And then Prince walks in the room and these people are like, are lost and just completely attracted to him, and it's cool to see, and it's a point of pride being connected with the person that that does that for other people. So that was cool. Can I ask you guys one question?
Yes.
Because I'm an old guy, but you guys are really young, and I'm just impressed and happy to see young people who appreciate Prince. How did you guys get into it and decide to do both this show, but how did you get into the music and become fans?
Ooh, this is actually really funny because we recently did a video on that. So for me, it's like I accidentally discovered all of my mom's vinyl in our attic because I originally grew up in Holland. So Prince was obviously really big there, had a few more hits than in the UK. And I think my mom even saw Vanity 6 perform in Holland once. So I'm very jealous of that. So that's how I got into Prince. And I've just always loved him. And through him, I've grown up on loads of artists from back in the days when I find that music was still good, which it's not now in my opinion. And we decided to start our YouTube channel in 2015, I think. So, and we made a video our first video was about Prince and the way he distributed music, but through a different way. So when you had the albums with the newspapers and stuff like that. And that's how we started it. And then we decided to continue with it after he passed away as well.
That's incredible.
I'm from a musical family, so my cousins are producers, songwriters, had their own record label, they're in studios. Another cousin is a famous artist. And my family are into all kinds of different music, but we all really love funk. So when I was a little kid, I remember just going to my cousin's house, going to the studio, and they'd put vinyls on the turntable, and one day it might be Cameo, one day it might be Zapp, one day it might be George Clinton, other days it'd be Prince, Revolution, NPG, all kinds of stuff. So I grew up on all of that stuff. I specifically remember being really young and kind of staring at the Diamonds and Pearls holographic cover because I'd never seen anything like that before. It's wow, this is cool. And then I guess when I got really, really into Prince and the fandom was kind of around the time that you started taking the photos of him. So One Night Alone kind of time, just pre-musicology, those early kind of 2000s. And that's when I signed up to prince.org, where I'm now a staff member and I've been on the site for 20 years or so. But the interesting thing about that time was that was probably his most kind of niche time. He was connecting with the fan base directly. He wasn't so much in the media spotlight until musicology happened. It was kind of those few years where it was all about MPG MC and doing independent stuff, and so you could really kind of get a much deeper connection to what he was doing than I think at other times. Right. And then I didn't get to see the One Night Alone tour, unfortunately. Wasn't really able to go to that at that time. But by the time 21 Nights rolled around, I was working. I was in my early 20s, and I went to 6 shows, 4 after shows. Met him after one of the shows as well in the Indigo, and that was it's just incredible opportunity. So what you were saying about Vegas, I think from having the thing in London when you live near somewhere where a residency is happening and you're like a super fan, it's just the best thing ever because you have so many opportunities to just go. So
It's interesting you mentioned Prince.org. So before I knew about Prince.org, it was actually on the One Night Alone tour that I found out about Prince.org because, again, even though I was part of the tour and everything, there was a lot of information that I just didn't know, like, okay, where are we going to next, or where's he going to play tonight? And I think it was DJ Dudley who was on that tour said, oh, just check on Prince.org. I'm like, what's that? You know, I'm like, oh, is that Prince's site that I don't know about? Because I thought it was just the music club. He's like, no. Just go to Prince.org. All the information you need is right there. So that actually, for someone that was in the Prince camp, Prince.org was a really great tool to find out what was going to happen. Well, we didn't know.
thanks for watching. That's it for part 1 of our exclusive Uncovering Prince interview with Afshin Shahidi. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss part 2, coming soon.